We are now live streaming.
I think so.
Okay, so let's
Not up.
reconvene at 1:02 now. And I say, much like, I'll repeat myself, much like this morning, we're now looking at the code of conduct, and I will let this start with Ms. Way giving her introduction, and then I'll try to get the counselors as their hands go up. Thank you.
Perfect. So apparently I've discovered while streaming, my internet slows down everything on my computer. So that's, I think, why my PowerPoint wasn't working before. But I just would like to reiterate that the purpose of the code of conduct is, I was going to read the statement of the principles, but I can't know, the whole thing is crashing. Fantastic. It's gonna load. Sorry. It's not gonna work at all. I can't even read it. Anyways, I think we all know what the principles are, but anyway, sorry, that's not a smoother welcoming, but is to govern the conduct and the actions of members of council specifically. This document isn't about staff's conduct. We have our own policies and procedures that deal with our conduct and our behavior. Today's draft is, I'm going to say, a very, very draft version of the code of conduct. I would just like to get that out there. There was a lot of ideas that were provided to me from members of council, which is great, but they weren't necessarily all consistent ideas. So I tried to pull what I could into one wholesome document. But if there's inconsistency amongst the schedules or different paragraphs and sections within it, that's why. It's because it's still very much a work in progress. And until I get a clear vision of where this is going to go, it's going to make it harder to clean up all those little pieces along the way. One of the reasons why I know this was referenced earlier, it doesn't have that clear line of, this is what was deleted and this is what was added, is because it's completely a new document. That was kind of the direction I was given, was they didn't like it at all from the complaint protocol process. And that whole section needed to be scrapped and restarted. So parts of that got taken out, got put into the code. Parts of, the whole protocol itself is completely revamped. It's still very much a working process, but the main thing is there's two parts. It's the code of conduct plus the complaint protocol. And then there's this 3 stages of the complaint protocol, which is conflict resolution, mediation, the integrity commissioner. I would like to clarify, because this has come up before and it came up in some of the comments as well. There's a difference between receiving a report from the integrity commissioner versus accepting the report from the integrity commissioner. So the integrity commissioner under the MCA IA especially, you need to physically get that report from them. Somehow that report needs to be presented to you. So you have to officially receive that in some capacity. Receiving a report does not necessarily mean that you are agreeing to what is in the report or accepting, what she has made as the outcome of the recommendations. It just means that, it's essentially saying, yes, we have the report. Thank you for doing this for us. So that is completely different than going, yes, thank you for the report. We agree with everything that's in here and therefore we're going to reprimand. So that's 2 very different processes, and we still legally need to be able to receive that report. So that's, some of that clicky lingo that, in common terms may be interpreted as the same, but from a bylaw perspective, they're very different meanings. So that's the gist of what I have to overview, but I expect there to be a wholesome discussion, and I'm happy to hear where this needs to go.
Excuse me, just one point of clarification. My read of this is that most of the, I'll call it, conduct that we are supposed to display hasn't really changed from the prior. It's the protocols, and the most significant change of which is putting in the, I'll call it the mediation stage. In other words, we're creating a step that is less than going to the integrity commissioner when the opportunity may be there, so that we don't, shall we say, we don't make a mountain out of a molehill. We only make a little hill out of a molehill if that is necessary, or that is all that's necessary.
Correct.
Okay. Having said all that, who would like to initiate the conversation on the code of conduct draft document in front of us? Okay, no hands are going up, so therefore Okay, I saw Counselor Bocheck first, followed by Counselor Douglas.
Thanks, Mayor Coatsier. Karen, I have a question for you before we even get into the semantics of this document and this guideline. When the Integrity Commissioner is involved, it can be either because of a complaint from staff, a complaint from another councillor member, or a complaint from the public.
Mhm.
If a complaint comes in from the public and there's no room for a mediator when that happens. The complaint comes in from the public about a member of council. The Integrity Commissioner gets directly involved with it, does the report, and finds out that no, the councillor was not in any way breaching the code of conduct. We're going to receive a bill from the Integrity Commissioner. Whether it's through a retainer or a surplus bill. But what is stopping any member of resident from making a complaint to the Integrity Commissioner or the Ombudsman? We find out it's frivolous or vexatious and there's no merit for it, yet the township ratepayers are being stuck with the bill for the Integrity Commissioner. It's a concern of mine before we even start talking about anything else. So I'm just wondering if you can clarify to us the different ways that the Integrity Commissioner gets involved, how the Integrity Commissioner gets involved, and who flips the bill for that. Because I think we've spent a lot of money, a lot of time on our Integrity Commissioner that perhaps, you know, with what's being brought forward here may mediate some of that cost, but may not. It may cost us more. So just a little insight into that, if you don't mind, and through the mayor, if that's okay, that our Miss Way will explain to us the procedure involved in getting the Integrity Commissioner involved.
Absolutely.
Ms. Way,
So
explain away, please.
we do have an agreement with the Integrity Commissioner, and I can't speak to the specifics offhand because I don't have it in front of me. But I mean, there is an annual retainer to provide her services, and as well, you know, those to provide those ongoing. If a member of council needs to go and receive advice from her regarding a particular conflict, you know, that's part of the purpose of having them here. If a complaint is received and it's investigated, that cost in whole is the responsibility of the township to pay. Now, the Integrity Commissioner does have the ability to say, this, you know, complaint isn't within the jurisdiction of the code, or this complaint isn't valid, without doing a wholesome report. If the complaint on the surface is a valid complaint, then a full investigation will be done. But if the complaint, you know, is referencing a meeting that never took place, or I'm just like making up something, or is about a member, you know, who wasn't even here that day or something like that, then obviously that's not a valid complaint to have been made. And there is some authority that the Integrity Commissioner has in order to say that this report or this complaint does not need to be investigated.
Okay, but if a investigation does take place because of a ratepayer's decision to make a complaint against a councillor, ultimately the township is going to pay that bill if there is an investigation required. Yeah, I'm not liking that too much, but anyways, we're going to go ahead and listen to some other councillors because I have some thoughts to do with the process. So we'll hear what someone else has to say for now.
I'm going to switch it over to Counselor Douglas, followed by Cooper, followed by Hazelton. And I'll just make the comment, please understand that some of what's in here is required by the province, whether we like it or not. Okay. Counselor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, along the same vein as Councillor Bocheck was talking about, actually. Maybe if we're going to talk about this, maybe we'll leave it until that whole topic actually comes up, because that's something that I wanted to ask is, you know, how is it that we can stop the public from, you know, just taking on personal vendettas, basically, because we are still paying our Integrity Commissioner to do a certain amount of investigation to come to the conclusion that there is no investigation to be had. So I like Councillor Bocheck like to know if we can implement something that lets the public know, or anyone making a complaint, whether it's public councillors or otherwise, that if it's found that there is no reason to investigate, that the costs go to that particular individual. But anyways, maybe that's a different discussion, so I'll leave that for now, but Councillor Bochuk hit on the same thing I was thinking of.
Okay, thank you. Council, oh, Ms. Gunby.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify to council that I think it was 3 terms ago, we did have a clause in the code of conduct that stated if a member of the public did file a complaint against a member of council and it was found to be frivolous and vexatious, they were then responsible for the costs. I do not believe that that is still included in the code of conduct at this time, but that was an option before.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, I believe you are next.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier. For you, Karen, a couple of things. Just want to understand, I wasn't aware that the code of conduct could be brought. Well, I understand that a public member can bring it forward, but I didn't realize that a member of the public immediately goes to the Integrity Commissioner and doesn't go through steps 1 and 2. Is that correct or not?
So the way it's written now, or that was the way it would have went before, but the way it's drafted now is a member of the public has the option to go either through, the intermediary in the mediation process, and then to the code of conduct if they so choose, because it is still technically their right to remain anonymous if they wish. So I can't remove that right.
So,
Not anonymous to the Integrity Commissioner, but anonymous through the public process. So members of council would not know who the complainant is. But whoever that makes that complaint needs to be a completely identifiable individual to the Integrity Commissioner. Is that clear as mud?
sort of, I guess. So you're saying that we have to treat members of the public differently than we do staff, members of council, and members of council.
Mm-hmm. Members of council. Yeah.
So, okay, so they can go immediately to say, I want confidentiality, and therefore it has to go to the Integrity Commissioner. But are we not also in the position at that juncture to say, Mr. or Mrs. Integrity Commissioner, this is coming forward. We see some vexatiousness here. Do we not get called in at all to sort of maybe stop it at the get-go because it's vexatious?
I don't believe that's within staff's or council's purview to make that decision.
Well, I wasn't thinking of council. I was thinking more of staff to be consulted by the Integrity. I've understood in the past the Integrity Commissioner is very clearly had a lot of communication with the CAO. So that isn't going to change, is it?
Ms. Gunby.
Thank you. It depends what the complaint is. So if someone goes right to the Integrity Commissioner, they bypass staff altogether. We don't even know there's something going to the Integrity Commissioner until she reaches out to us, if she reviews it briefly to see if it's vexatious. And if she determines it to be vexatious, she will just reply to that person and say, your complaint has no merit. Whether I have not, as CAO, I have not been involved in any sort of integrity complaint filed with the Integrity Commissioner. So I can't comment on the working relationship between the CAO and the IC, but I would assume that I would only be contacted if I was present at a meeting or at an event where a certain incident took place. I highly doubt she would just call me to get my opinion on something I've heard about.
Mm-hmm. Just
Sorry.
So I was just going to say, kind of to add on to that, I've updated it so that the Integrity Commissioner has to reach out to the clerk to obtain any records that are within the custody and control of the municipality, since the clerk is the person who is responsible for records management within our jurisdiction. So if there was records or evidence that this person was making a vexatious claim through that process, and those records would be within our custody and control, then that's something we could provide at that point in time once contacted.
I also believe that if we were to prepare a new code of conduct with new protocol, a copy of that would immediately go to the Integrity Commissioner, so she would be aware of the other options, whether or not she chose to exercise them. At least she would be aware.
Yeah. This can't come forward for final approval without her input. So, but I don't think we're there yet.
So thank you. And just sort of dealing with the same subject matter. So the code of conduct, though, applies to members of council and staff. Is that correct?
No, to council.
Okay, what about the public or committee members?
So I don't know. There's no, I mean, members of council have to, or members of the public have to follow appropriate decorum within council meetings, but the members of the public are not held accountable under the MCA or the Municipal Act.
So that in the past, and I just want to make sure that I don't know how this happened, but there was a member of the public who brought a issue forward on code of conduct against a counselor, I believe it was. And when one of the previous integrity commissioners, who was removed for performance issues, came forward and said this person was being vexatious and found them to be vexatious. I just want to make sure this never happens again. And then subsequently, they were billed $8,000. And if they didn't pay it, it was going to go on their tax bill. It was disgusting. That can't happen again, can it?
Sorry, are you saying the complainant purposely made a complaint that was vexatious and then they were held financially responsible?
The member of the public, yes.
The person who falsely filed the complaint. So currently that clause is not included in the code of conduct, but based off today's discussion, I've added it as something to investigate, to have them responsible. Is that what you're asking me? You want the member of the public held accountable if they make a vexatious complaint. You do not want them held financially accountable.
No, I'm saying this is something that happened in the past and I found it quite out of line. And especially when the integrity commissioner at the time was basically got out of the business because of their findings. So I think we need to be really careful that if the code of conduct applies to council, it applies to council. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Dunby, did you want to add something to this?
I was just going to state, because I was here at that time, and I don't believe a member of the public purposely filed anything that was vexatious at that time. It's just the integrity commissioner did find it vexatious, and that clause was in there. And the code of conduct, while it does deal with members of council only and their behavior and conduct, any member of the public, staff, or other counselor could file a complaint regarding the code of conduct.
Sorry, Peter, just to make sure I'm clear on this, though. I realize that you're acknowledging what I was referring to, but the final piece was this member of the public ended up being billed $8,000. And I want to make sure that we have nothing in here that would ever allow that to happen.
Currently, that's correct. There's nothing in here. However, Councillor Bochek has made reference to the fact that perhaps they should be held financially accountable earlier this meeting. So this is why we're having this conversation. You're muted, Your Worship.
Thank you for that reminder. I've heard from Councillors Bochuk, Douglas, Cooper. Would the other three like to add anything before the original group? Because Councillor Hazelton?
Yeah, you had me on your list, but you must have let me fall off. Anyways, I wanted just, that's fine. I wanted to point out that, first of all, Karen, you've done a phenomenal job trying to assemble what I will assume is lots of comment and feedback. I will point out, though, that section 17 in your current document, formal complaints, seems to be in conflict significantly with dates and times and everything else with the section of the complaint protocol, Schedule B, where things are all redefined, timelines, time windows, and everything else. So I'm going to assume that that's something that it needs more work.
Yes.
Okay, so having said that, I wanted to point out a couple of things here. If we just stay in section 18 for a second, because some of that verbiage I think is useful and maybe just is in the wrong place. But we talk about things where the complaints are outside of the Integrity Commissioner's jurisdiction. And we talk about things like criminal matters and other things, lack of jurisdiction, matter already pending. So one of the things that I think is probably relevant here is that if there is a matter that the integrity commissioner has ruled on with respect to one counselor, and there is a subsequent complaint at a later time that deals with that same matter, it is essentially challenging the integrity commissioner's position, if you will, or maybe putting the integrity commissioner in a conflict of interest because he, she, they are having to defend their previous decision. And this may be introducing new material, but not to the same counselor. And so I think that we have to include some verbiage in here that encourages the integrity commissioner to recuse themselves where there is a matter of, we'll call it sensitive, potentially conflicting nature, where the only way they could rule on this new matter is if they went out of their way to defend a previous matter. And in all courts of law, that's a conflict. So I think we need to have that wording in there somewhere. One of the things that I think is really important in all of this is we as council need to ensure that our integrity commissioner is doing the right job and not acting in their own unique little protected world without responsibility. And so there is lots of language in here where we are seeing the word may. The integrity commissioner may proceed as follows. And there's lots of other examples. The integrity commissioner may contact or speak to other persons. And I think it's, in the world of if you are challenged or charged or brought up on a code of conduct violation, the counselor who is the recipient of this challenge should have similar rights to a court of law, where if this counselor feels that there is evidence or people that can clear their name, that the integrity commissioner shall proceed, shall investigate, shall contact these sources of information, because I can speak from certainty in my example, and it can be confirmed by staff at the township that staff at the township and the references that I provided were not contacted, and the integrity commissioner chose to act in her little world of may proceed as opposed to shall proceed. And I think that is completely irresponsible. It is completely unfair. And we need language in this that says it's fine for somebody to challenge and try to call out a counselor, a member of council on a particular matter, but it's not reasonable or fair or just to not require our integrity commissioner to follow the evidence that is provided to them to get a full picture. And as I said, staff at the township can verify what I'm saying in my case, and I'm certain that others can do the same in other examples, but I think it's really, really important that we do that. I'll pause there and let somebody else speak.
Thank you. Councillor Rienko, followed by Councillor Jarvis, whether you have your hand up or not.
I just wanted to clarify from Karen. So the copy you sent out the other day doesn't show any changes. So I'm not quite sure what changes you made. And there's no yellow changes on my copy.
No, there is not any yellow changes because the changes are so significant that I wasn't able to do that. like I was the procedural bylaw.
Okay, then, so I haven't had a chance to reread it. I wasn't planning on rereading the whole thing to look for major changes. So I'm at somewhat of a loss here to find out if I accept this with all these changes made. So I think I probably put that on the record, is that I probably can't make a decision on this today.
I'm not sure anybody was expecting us to make a decision today, considering that this draft is incomplete. I think rather that Clerk Way is looking for our input so that she can prepare a more refined draft for further review. This is, I think, at least one stage, if not two, behind where she is with the code of conduct at this moment.
Okay, so how do you plan on proceeding then? Are we going to do some overall generic ones? Are we going to go through it in detail? I'm not quite sure how we're planning on reviewing this today then.
I think what we're looking for is input like we've been receiving from various people as to their concerns about what's in front of them, so that then Ms. Way can come up with a more refined, more complete draft for further review.
Okay, then I have one issue that I wanted to bring up.
Please.
And I think it was under section Schedule B 1.11, where the complaint must be, okay, the complaint may not become known, okay. It talks about a 30-day window between knowing of the complaint and filing the complaint. And I was wondering, in past experience with these things, quite often what individuals do is they look for a pattern of complaints and not necessarily one complaint. So it may take several months before you get a half a dozen complaints. How do you work that out? Like obviously for the last, I can see it doing 30 days after the last complaint, but quite often you want a pattern more than just one complaint. So how do you handle that?
The reason it's down to 30 days from the date of the event is because the majority of comments I received were asking that it's a shorter, closer time frame. So if there is an issue, it can be dealt with immediately, as opposed to waiting 6 months and then dealing with something someone did 6 months ago, or repeatedly continues to have incorrect behavior. So that's why it's been reduced down to 30 days. If someone wants to wait for a pattern of behavior, then they could file a complaint on the last item if they're wishing to wait for a pattern first.
Okay, so you could wait for a pattern to happen and then 30 days from the last one you file.
Mhm.
Ms. Gunby.
Thank you. I would highly recommend against people waiting for a pattern to occur, because it might be something that it occurs once and then never again, and then you've missed your window. So if you think something is so severe that you have to go to the integrity commissioner, then I would recommend to anyone to do it immediately and not wait to see if it may or may not happen again, because then you're going to lose your chance. And it's much easier staffing wise, if they, or counselor wise, if they need to contact whoever the integrity commissioner is, if they need to contact members of the public or council or staff, it's easier for us to say, yes, this was within the last couple of weeks. But if you want to talk about something that happened 2 years ago, I can't really recall everything that happened, and it's much easier this way. It used to say 6 weeks, so 30 days. We've just reduced it to that.
Well, I'm a fair individual. I'll give anybody a freebie. So if somebody wants to take a run at me once, I'm not going to complain about it. But if it happens more than 2 or 3 times, then I will complain. But I'm a fair guy. In the heat of the moment, somebody might say something. I'll let it go the first time. So I don't know. Maybe I'm too realistic.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jarvis, you got a turn if you like it before we go to the second round.
Yeah, for the sake of argument here, I will echo comments made by Councillor Hazelton, and I think it is important because I've seen, or my impression was, there has been with previous integrity commissioners' reports that they seem to only use evidence produced from one side of the story and not the other side. We all know that there are at least 19 different sides to a story, and I think we've got to somehow make it clear that if the integrity commissioner is involved in an investigation, all evidence has to be considered on its own merits. and not just selective evidence. I don't know how we do that. I don't know if there's a requirement within the Municipal Act or the MCIA. I'd like to know that, but I would feel much more comfortable knowing that somebody who I know was being an arbiter of a concern and complaint was looking at it as even-handedly as possible. And I don't want to have the feeling that not all evidence is being considered. I don't know how we do that. If it's possible within our duty of our code of conduct that can be done, then great. But that is to me a very significant concern. Clerk has already received a number of things from me via email, I hope. Though our email communication was a little disconnected there for a while, like everybody else's, it seems. So a lot of my stuff I think has been dealt with, and it was all minor. So this is a big major one. I think it is something we've got to be very, very cognizant of and figure out how to work with. That's it.
Thank you. I'm going to make a few comments before we go to the next round. I think we have to be conscious, and I'm saying this without having full knowledge, but we have to be conscious of what the province has written with regards to integrity commissioners, because to some degree, as Councillor Jarvis pointed out, we are subject to the provincial rules. I also think what's very important is what we're trying to add with our review of the code of conduct, and I think it has to be emphasized as we get closer to the final version, is that we are giving staff, council, and the general public routes to take, ways to make their complaint prior to going to the integrity commissioner. Now, we can't tell the public that they can't go to the integrity commissioner right off, of course. But I think what's important is that we're going to give everybody options so that things can be resolved, hopefully, in some cases, before they escalate into not only a long-winded and expensive procedure, but also before the offensive behavior might possibly have been, shall we say, nipped in the bud, as opposed to just getting worse. Because in some cases, I'm sure all of us, and certainly myself, are guilty of breaking the code inadvertently. We don't know that we've broken it, or we didn't understand that that's how it was being perceived, or what have you. And so I think the sooner we can have people tell us that they're concerned about somebody's behavior, and at the, let me call it the easiest level, I'm hoping that the goal of that will not only be improved behavior amongst all of us where appropriate, but also reduced cost, reduced stress and aggravation that may not be necessary. So that's my input at this point. I believe I saw Councillors Cooper and Bocheck. Councillor Hazelton, you have your hand up again? Okay, so let's go Cooper, Bocheck, Hazelton at this point, and I'll try to remember Councillor Hazelton is third in line.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier. And, you know, there's a number of issues here, but I think you hit on something that Karen pointed out to us at the last council meeting when discussing this, and that is that essentially, aside from some wordsmithing or changes in the general body, the real key here is trying to find ways to get to mediated solutions without going a deep dive into the integrity commissioner. So I completely and totally support that concept. I think that would apply to, if you think about it, if you work in the business world, you don't drag somebody off to the police station first. You maybe work through some things. And I think that we've been going to the police station far too many times. So I really do support this, and I think it allows us to get to a better spot. I do agree, though, with what Councillor Hazelton has sort of suggested, and others, that we need to take a very careful look at what guidance we give to the Integrity Commissioner. I realize that the Integrity Commissioner says, these are my protocols, take them or leave them. I'm not sure we should take them if we don't like what we see. In other words, maybe we need somebody else. So I think we need to look at the processes, not so much the work itself, but the processes and the protocols, so that we can avoid situations where we have an integrity commissioner who appears or actually has acted in such a fashion that we have seen somebody acting as the judge, jury, basically seeing only one side of the story. There's no defense for the person accused, or virtually none. So we need to work on that in this particular document, and those are my comments about the integrity commissioner part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bochek.
Thank you. Just going to review my notes here. Yeah, I think we have to walk very carefully on this. 6 years on council, I've heard from the integrity commissioner once on an issue about a councillor. I've never been dragged in front of the integrity commissioner, so I don't know what that's like. And if I have a problem with one of my fellow councillors, and I think most of them can attest to this, I phone them, or I go out for lunch with them, and we have a talk. We figure out what's wrong, where it went wrong, why it went wrong. I have no desire to have mediation. If I have a complaint against the mayor or Councillor Cooper, whoever, I don't want to sit in a room and discuss it to see if there's a way to mediate it. I take that upon myself to talk to that councillor. And I don't want to be brought up in sitting in a room being questioned on what I've declared. So if I have a complaint against the councillor, I'm going to phone the integrity commissioner and state my claim to the integrity commissioner. Her job, his job, their job is to investigate by calling the rest of council, calling the people that were involved, getting their statements, compiling the information, and bringing a report back to us to receive, which I think is a great process. So I'm not in favor of changing our current way of doing things with the integrity commissioner. I think it works if everybody plays the game right. To say this without any prejudice, the code of conduct needs to have some backbone. And if somebody breaks the municipal act, they need to be held accountable. The integrity commissioner is the person that does that. And the integrity commissioner can find out very quickly if there's no basis of it. And then it's over with. And it's happened many times that way. But to bring the CAO or an outside person in to get involved in my issue with another councillor, I prefer to go to the integrity commissioner and have it handled professionally by a lawyer. Do agree with Mr. Cooper that it is kind of one-sided, although they're supposed to investigate and ask all the questions to all the people involved. There's no form of defense. And that is a problem. That when we receive the report, and I'm saying receive the report, there's a difference, like our CAO said. When we receive the report, it's taken verbatim. There's no ability for the person who was accused to say, oh, hold on here, that's not right. That's wrong. So that's where the problem lies. But I don't want to enter into mediation. If I have a problem with Councillor Cooper, I'll talk to him. If I don't get resolved, I'll go directly to the integrity commissioner or the ombudsman to find a resolve for it. And I think that's you need that policing. You need that. I think Peter Cooper was looking for the word executioner at the end of his statement. And really, they are judge, jury, and executioner, unfortunately. But that's where it's going to end up anyways. You know, if we sit down in mediation and nothing is resolved, it's going to end up in their hands anyways. So I think it read right. I don't think there's a need to modify it. And if it's going to be modified, I don't think a mediator should be involved. This took a lot of thinking because I supported the mediator idea at a past council meeting. So I am two-stepping on this thing after a lot of consideration. I think the system that's in place works quite well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Counselor Hazelton, I remembered you this time.
Wonderful. So I wanted to talk about a couple other things, but before I do, Councillor Bocek just kind of painted a scenario where if he had been charged with something under the code of conduct, he would expect the integrity commissioner to come in and talk to the people in the township to find out what really took place and whether or not he in fact did violate the code of conduct. And I agree, that is a perfect scenario where the integrity commissioner is doing their job. Sadly, and I can guarantee you that that did not happen in my case. And so we have a flaw in process here. It's not me talking. You can get that same information from staff at the township. So current staff at the township. So we have a problem in what is currently going on. And secondly, Councillor Bocek talks about his personal approach and not wanting to have mediation. And I get that. And I think all of us councillors may follow a similar path. But if we have a code of conduct coming at us from staff or from a private individual, what I've heard over and over and over again is a desire to reduce the cost of our integrity commissioner. And I think what that graduated three-step process is an attempt to find a path for people that perhaps are not as strong personalities as each of us councillors to allow us to deal with situations where either staff or the public are complaining about councillor behavior and we are seeking ways of dealing with it without the really expensive integrity commissioner cost process. So that's a couple of just kind of background comments. Karen, I got one thing for you. And this is a bit of a nit, but in the wording of it on page 23 of 25, items 2.3 and 2.4, they actually conflict with each other. One says the integrity commissioner may, but is under no obligation to provide the member with a draft of the proposed report. And then the next one, integrity commissioner shall not issue a report without prior written, without the member having had the opportunity to discuss in person or in writing and provide comment on it. So I think we want to relook at those two statements because they, I think, are in direct conflict with each other. The other thing that I think is relevant, and again, I'm trying to be sensitive to all the comments I've heard from other councillors about trying to reduce the cost of the integrity commissioner. And we have a current situation where when the integrity commissioner writes a report, there seems to be this expectation that she is going to come and delegate in front of council and review the report, which of course has typical either day and day travel plus time costs and perhaps an overnight cost, as opposed to the fact that council could receive the report and could discuss the report and then could decide that they want to request a delegation from the integrity commissioner for further discussion at some other time. So there are other processes that are available to us here. And I think that we may want to explicitly articulate that other option, such as we don't expect the IC to come and present to us where that report has already been written. What we need to do is, as a council, well, we are obligated to receive the report, and we don't have to necessarily take action on that report. We can bring that report back with a delegation at another time. And that would have a significant cost savings on a matter that has gone to the integrity commissioner. So I think that could be a useful process as well. But just to kind of reiterate, I think this multi-step process that has been recommended is useful. It may not be useful for councillors, But kind of the level 1, level 2, level 3, I think is useful. The one thing that I would strongly recommend, though, is that where a member of the public or staff who are considering making a confidential, anonymous complaint, if you will, where they want to jump to integrity commissioner level, I think that they need to have, or we need to have something in our policy here that informs them that the beginnings of this process may be confidential, but it's highly unlikely that they are going to be able to remain anonymous throughout the entire process. Very similar to the concept of if you complain about your neighbor, the township will do a bylaw complaint process and keep you confidential. But if you have to take it to court, names are going to come out and people are going to get identified. So I wouldn't want somebody trying to hide behind that kind of confidential nature and go direct to the integrity commissioner. I think that it would be more transparent for us to inform people who are making complaints and going through this process that yes, we could jump you to the integrity commissioner level 3 if you think you want to maintain anonymity, but the likelihood you're going to be exposed down the road is high, and you probably want to follow one of these less costly processes to the township before you jump to that IC level. Pause. Thank you.
Thank you. The only immediate response I would make to that, Councillor Hazelton, is again, we have to make sure that what we are putting into our policy is not in conflict with the provincial policy, which does allow opportunity for people to complain without at least initially being identified. So that's, I know that Clerk Way, as she's going to be redrafting this document, will be sensitive to the fact that we can't be in conflict with the provincial document.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we don't accept them. All I'm suggesting is that given the process, it's highly likely that identification cannot remain forever anonymous. Although our policies may try to accomplish that, the risks of being identified down the road are probably significant. And I would just suggest that we want to be upfront with anybody who's going to exercise this process. Thank you.
But you do appreciate that the person, or maybe CO Gumby's about to say this, that the individual has the right to go straight to the IC, the integrity commissioner, without us even being aware of it. For all we know, any one of us could be, she could have a complaint in front of her about any one of us at this moment, and we just don't know.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing I would want through your worship is to appear that we are in any sort of way trying to scare people out of making a complaint, if that is what their wish is to do.
Sorry about that, I muted myself. I've heard from, you're pointing that way, but Councillor Bocheck, I don't know who you're pointing to. Perhaps Councillor Douglas.
Yes.
Okay, because each one of us have a different pattern of faces on our screen. Councillor Douglas, you got a few people pointing at you.
I do actually. I just wanted to make comment that, there's some really good valid points made here. And I think especially when a councillor is put in the hot seat for one reason or another, that they have an opportunity to dispute what's in that report and have it go further down the track. And maybe that has to do with who, if we're not happy with the integrity commissioner and how they work. But then again, it would be interesting to know what the province has to say about that process. So I'm sure that's going to get looked at with Karen. But we do have another part of the public going to the integrity commissioner, which I don't know how we would deal with this, but it does happen and has, where you've got a member of the public that wants to deliberately tarnish the name of a councillor. yeah, we have to pay our integrity commissioner to go through some sort of reporting, whether we hear about it in council or not. Like, as you said, Mayor Coetzee, we may not know when we're being investigated, but that is going to get billed to us. So I don't know how or what kind of wording we can put in place where that the onus of that expense, when it's found to not be a valid complaint, is not, not borne by the public. And that does happen. Absolutely. So I would like to see some sort of wording in. I don't know what it is, because I realized that apparently there was a situation that Councillor Cooper was talking about, which I wasn't around, I don't think, at the time. So I don't really know anything about that one, but, and that was incorrectly done by the sounds of it, or is perceived to be incorrectly done. But there are people out there that just, that's what they want to do. So I think there has to be something in place that protects us as councillors from that kind of complaint that comes in. And I don't know what the wording is for that, so we don't get ourselves in deep. And we most certainly don't want to be scaring people off, as our CAO has said. But on the other hand, I think there needs to be some sort of wording in there that says, if you're going to do this, be sure of what you're saying. If it's found to be vexatious or untrue and proven to be untrue, then there has to be some repercussion to that member of the public. I think that's very important to get that message out in some way in our document. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors Jarvis or Rienko, do you wish to join in this round? Councilor Jarvis, followed by Councilor Rienko.
I'll reiterate my thinking on this one. I think Karen's gotten a big enough hint that we got to check on how we get all sides of the story investigated by the IC. But the other item that's been discussed heatedly here is the mediation process as an option. And I think, just based on what I've been hearing and what I've read, from the standpoint of keeping the costs to a minimum where possible, as much as I agree with Councillor Bocheck, you have a conflict with somebody, call them up and sort it out. But that doesn't work for everybody. So in light of everything, the idea of having that mediation step makes a lot of sense to me. And I think we should be really, really staying with that part of the process. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Rienko.
I don't know if this is too radical or not.
You're muted, Councillor Rienko.
Sorry. I may be a bit too radical here, but I'm having some trouble with these 3 levels of review. I do agree that there should be some form of mediation between the complaint and possibly going to the integrity commissioner. But do we need 3 levels? Like, do we need to have conflict resolution and mediation? Can't we just have one of those, call it mediation or whatever? I hate to go through if somebody came and complained about me, I hate to go through a 3-step process. It would be so long and onerous and very stressful to go through each of the stages. And I was just wondering if we can narrow it down just to have two stages. That's my radical suggestion. I don't know if anybody would support that. Also, the idea of these vexatious complaints, I think at some point, maybe not the first one, but if an individual makes a continuous vexatious complaint against a councillor, I think at some point you got to cut bait and fish, and these people have got to start paying for those filing of complaints. But maybe on the first one, no, but maybe a second or third one, I think they should start possibly paying for the costs of the mediation or the integrity commissioner. And on the mediation, if we're just going to the one level or even both levels, I'm not quite sure who would be chosen for conflict resolution or who would be chosen for mediation. To me, if I want a mediator, I want the integrity commissioner to be the mediator. That's me. But anyway, I'm not quite sure how the process works here. But if we get down to one level of mediation and then the integrity commissioner, I'd be much.
Thank you. Councilor Cooper, I'm going to speak for a few moments before I go to round 3 on this whole thing. I think we have some very interesting comments, and I can see that Clerk Way is busy taking far more notes than I am, but I believe that this is some good discussion, some good input. And, you know, what this doesn't reflect, of course, which is, should be, in most cases, hopefully, the first step is the totally informal situation. In a not too distant past, I received a complaint from a resident in regards to a counselor. And what I basically did is said I would look into it and I passed it on to the relevant counselor. Now, it so happens that I didn't think the complaint was terribly serious. And what I mean is in depth of crime. But the complainant was making an observation, and I now know that the counselor has heard that observation and will respond in the way that he or she thinks is best. And I think, you know, sometimes we have to recognize that some of these things are going to happen even before this whole document kicks in. Because I'm sure that individual made no reference to our code of conduct, made no reference to our procedures, simply thought that a counselor had acted inappropriately. You know, and by the way, this was outside of council, outside of official business. But, you know, so I think we you know, and maybe I'm speaking partially to what Councilor Wienko just said. I think in many cases, we should be able to resolve things as soon as we're aware of it by just responding and saying, yeah, we'll look into it, or thank you very much for your observation, and we'll make sure it's passed on. I think in some cases we can prevent this from going even to the first stage of no matter how many stages we have. I just make that comment, and I think that it's, you know, ideally we produce this code of conduct and we never have to use it. And that's on all of us to do our best to behave in a fair and respectful manner with everyone. But we all slip. We know that. Myself definitely included, unfortunately. There, that's honesty. And with that, let's go round three. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier, and good thoughts from you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to comment about a couple of things. There's been sort of a focus a little bit on the mediation process, reducing costs. And I'm certainly one of the first guys that says, how much is this going to cost? It always sort of is in front of me and top of mind. But I think there's another aspect, well, a very important aspect of the mediation side of things, which is it allows for a reduction in the turning up the heat. So not only does it cost less, but it is a step process that allows us, a complainant, to not have to go through a integrity commissioner report, and which is very lengthy and very divisive, and this allows to turn down the volume and the heat and get some sort of solution. As you point out, Mayor, and others, Brian Boychuk, Councillor Boychuk talked about just phoning somebody up. I'm in complete agreement. That might be step one, but just because we have these other tools in our tool chest doesn't mean that we're going to go through all these steps. That would be, if you made it to the integrity commissioner, boy, we've really got a problem, because if we can't work it out either one-on-one or with somebody at the township or with somebody, so the second mediation would be, I would think, typically with a qualified mediator, somebody like Councillor Wanku. If you were to look at the dispute resolution organization, you can see that there are some very highly qualified individuals that are judges and so on that can help mediate things before we get to that final stage, which is like going to court with the integrity commissioner. So I am, thinking that there's two advantages. There's the cost side, but there's also the tools that it gives us to try and work through issues. And that's why I support what has been suggested here near the end of this document. I realize there's a lot of other changes throughout the document that we're still sort of thinking about and drafting and so forth. But I think the concept is what we were mainly hopefully going to be discussing today, which is to try and get to a better place. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Great discussion, and it's kind of hard to listen to any of us and not agree with all of us. It's one of those topics where we know we're being held accountable. I think any breach of the Municipal Act needs to be addressed by the Integrity Commissioner. All other complaints, all other accusations that are made, you know, like Mayor Coetsier said, you know, sometimes it's just a fact of informing somebody and letting them know that somebody has said something about your conduct, but it's not a breach of the Municipal Act, so it doesn't need to escalate into Integrity Commissioner. But when you breach the Municipal Act, you swore an oath to uphold the Municipal Act. And if there's an accusation that you have breached that act, we need a body to say, yes, you did, or no, you didn't. And if Integrity Commissioner is doing their job properly, they would investigate all sides of the story. I know in the first term of council, when a member of council was brought up for breach of the Municipal Act, the Integrity Commissioner of the day phoned every single councillor and got their opinion on what happened. Since that time, 5 years ago, I've never heard from an Integrity Commissioner. Never asked for my comments. Were you aware that this had happened? What are your thoughts on the accusations that have been made? 5 years, never heard a word from an Integrity Commissioner. The first time I did, and that was almost 6 years ago. But if it's a breach or a suspected breach, I think the Integrity Commissioner has to be called in. Any other thing other than a breach of the Municipal Act, I don't think she needs to be involved. I think we can come up with some sort of mediation or some sort of a protocol that addresses it. And if there's no resolve, then take it to the Integrity Commissioner. But if there's an accusation of the breach of the Municipal Act, I think she needs to be called in right away. Thank you.
All right, thank you. CEO Gunby, when you appear, you want to speak, don't you?
That's exactly. It's easier than raising my hand and having you ignore me. So, you know, this. I just wanted to clarify that Councillor Wojcik is referring to the Municipal Act, but the Integrity Commissioner only works with the Code of Conduct. The Municipal Act, if there's anyone breaching that specific legislation, they go to the Ombudsman, just for clarification.
Thank you. Any other hands at this moment? Councillor Cooper.
I really would like to thank the CAO for that clarification. That, you know, something that was in breach of the Municipal Act would be a very serious issue. And I completely agree with Councillor Wojcik. That's not what we're talking about today. Thank you.
Okay, we have given Clerk Way some material to work with, I believe. This is not, I presume you're not planning coming back to us with something next month to approve, but rather a further draft. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to say to all councillors, hopefully you get an opportunity over the next week or two, if you're so inclined, to reread what Clerk Way has put together for us. And if you have other further input to provide to her, I think it'd be a good idea. And then in possibly November, we will review it again, because the resolution that's in front of me is not that one. Yes, it is that one. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved, the council receives the Code of Conduct Review Report, and the council direct the clerk to make necessary changes to the Code of Conduct bylaw for review by the Integrity Commissioner and bring back at the November 2020 regular council meeting. Any further comment? Councillor Wienko,
Just to clarify,
please.
this is going to be reviewed by the IC before it comes back to us. Is that what you said?
Ideally, that was my initial thought. I don't know, based off today's suggestions, if that'll happen between now and November or after I receive further comments in November.
I think that's critical. I don't know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on a document that she may not, what he or she may not accept. So I'd rather get it reviewed by them as soon as possible and
Okay.
then come to us for, yeah, I don't know what other people think, but I think it's important to get it to as soon as possible.
Okay, then I can make changes and get that draft version to her for comments.
Well, sorry, Counselor Cooper.
Thank you. I would just like to say that while it would be interesting to have the Integrity Commissioner's comments, I think council's in the driver's seat here, and we need to be considering what we want to happen with not only our code of conduct, but with our Integrity Commissioner. I think we've already raised some issues today which pertain to the work that has been done in the past. So I think we need to remember that. Thank you.
All right. Do I need to read the resolution one more time? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 have voted in favor. Next in front of me, whereas section 239(2), moved by Councillor Bocheck, seconded by Councillor Cooper, whereas section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, provides authority for councils and municipalities to close a meeting or parts of a meeting to the public if the subject matter pertains to a matter identified in section 239(2). And whereas the council of the Township of Georgian Bay, page 1, Bay deems it necessary to close this portion of the meeting in order to address matters under the following section of 239(2). A, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, re Macy Bay LPAT. Now be it resolved that council of the Township of Georgian Bay moves into closed session council at 2:09 p.m.
I'm just
All
gonna
those in-
stop. Sorry,
You're going to tell me that you've already stopped?
no,
Okay, all those in favor? All right, so we all agree that we're moving into closed council at 2:09 p.m.